look at stuff and I can sell merchandise outside of the brick and mortar that I'm used to. You know, brick and mortar is the bread and butter that I've always known. But Seth is bringing, after 10 years of being in the business, he's bringing in new technology that I'm really not used to. And it's hard for me to change. If he can show me profit, I can change.
Viewers believed they were watching a pawn shop at war, where deals changed hands and tempers exploded. But behind the glare of the stage lights, a different story was playing out. A story that the cast of Hardcore Pawn is now ready to tell. What if the chaos was manufactured and what you thought you knew was only part of the truth? Join us as we unveil the revelations about the Hardcore Pawn cast that most fans never figured out. The business behind the drama. On television, Hardcore Pawn looked like Detroit's wildest battleground. People screamed across counters, security guards rushed in, and the Gold family seemed to thrive amid the storm. It was chaos packaged as entertainment, and each episode left viewers believing America's pawn business was truly loud and unpredictable. But if you walked into American Jewellery and Loan without the cameras rolling, what you would find would leave you stunned. Long before television came calling, American Jewellery and Loan was already a Detroit landmark. Les Gold founded the business in 1978, following in his grandfather's footsteps, who had owned a small pawn shop called Sam's Loans in the city's old working-class district. From its modest beginnings, Les built something that no one expected, a 50,000-square-foot complex on 8 Mile Road. His vision was to give ordinary people fast, legal access to cash when banks said no.
The good thing is, pawn shops, pawning items, they're non-recourse loans, so it's not going to hurt their credit scores or their ability to get credit.
By the time True TV came calling, American Jewellery and Loan had already become one of the largest pawn operations in the country, serving thousands of customers a week. The producers wanted a show that captured the real Detroit, something grittier than the polished world of Pawn Stars. But reality television rarely wants reality, so the tensions and the wild confrontations became the order of the show. Meanwhile, pawnbroking didn't work that way. The economics of pawnbroking are precise. Each transaction begins with an appraisal, that is, an estimate of an item's resale value based on condition, demand, and current market prices. The shop then lends a percentage of that value, often between 20 and 60%, depending on the risk of depreciation. That means if a customer walks into the store with a $200 wristwatch, they don't walk out with $200. Instead, the wristwatch is appraised and based on its resale value. The customer is given a loan of around $50 to $120. The customer is also given 30 to 90 days to repay this loan with interest. If they return, the wristwatch is given back to them. If not, it becomes inventory, and the shop sells it at retail to recover the loan and make a profit. That constant cycle of small and secured loans is what really keeps a pawn business alive. Many people don't come back for their items, yet for every wristwatch that makes it to the display case, hundreds more are redeemed in silence. But if appraisers don't check properly, they might end up taking in a valueless item, so unlike how the TV show might portray them, they rely on training and not temper. They test gold purity, weigh carats, and check the hourly market rates. Putting a price on the item is also an aspect that requires precision. If it is underpriced, the business bleeds. If it is overpriced, then it never sells. It is a controlled economy of desperation, running on a kind of discipline the show pretended didn't exist. If the pawn shop's real business was nothing like the chaos we saw on screen, then it wasn't about how the Golds ran their store, but about how the producers ran their show. Because if television could turn a functioning, lawful business into a circus of shouting and spectacle, then what else did they construct for the cameras? If the producers could create the facade of the show, what more did they hide? The architecture of reality TV. Millions of viewers tuned in each week, believing they were witnessing real life unfold inside a Detroit pawn shop. Hardcore Pawn looked messy, human, and convinced people they were watching life as it happened. But little did they know that the chaos was not a mere coincidence. Behind the illusion of a typical day was a whole operation going on. Production didn't precisely follow the store's calendar. Instead, it followed the television schedule. That meant episodes were not shot one after the other in natural sequence. Sometimes they need 2 weeks to finish an episode. The shop would be in production mode for days non-stop, and a full season could require 9 weeks of shooting. How was that possible? This is where continuity comes in. To make several days of filming feel like one day, cast and crew often wore the same outfits across multiple days. That way, they look the same way for the episode they are shooting. Oftentimes, real pawnbroking transactions require some quiet minutes of negotiation, but that doesn't sell on television. Audiences could get bored, and the show's ratings could drop drastically. The producers needed a faster rhythm, which led to the next secret they hid from their fans: heightened emotion and conflict. Although Les Gold said the customers were never told what to say or handed a script, the producers created an environment where drama was rewarded. Customers were encouraged to push harder and get emotional. Even former employees confirm that while on-screen walk-ins could be prearranged, the crew selected moments for dramatic emphasis. And that's how their editing helped finish what filming began. They didn't do anything specific to improve the camera there in Detroit. Instead, they worked their magic in post-production rooms hundreds of miles away. There, editors worked like architects, cutting together hours of separate events until every confrontation, every slam of the door, looked like it truly happened within minutes of each other. The irony is that the more artificial it became, the more real it felt. Viewers praised Hardcore Pawn for showing the real Detroit, calling it grittier and more authentic than Pawn Stars. In fact, the show's 2010 debut broke True TV records, drawing over 2 million viewers. Yet some critics and viewers alike began to question the authenticity. Some recognized repetition, others saw familiar sets and exaggerated reactions. The show's success, therefore, hinged on the very tension it created between "is this real?" and "it sure looks real." This ended up pulling in even more views from returning viewers who wanted to see what they missed. The editing was invisible, and the storytelling seamless. But if television could make reality look that real, what did it do to the people inside it? The family front. If you judged them only by television, you'd think the Gold family could barely stand to be in the same room. Father shouting at daughter, son rolling his eyes. It was reality TV Gold. But the real story of the Golds wasn't about a family slowly tearing apart. It was about a family that understood one thing better than anyone else: survival. Behind the arguments and slammed counters was a tightly run operation where trust meant everything. The Golds had been doing business together long before the cameras arrived. Les Gold was no newbie to pawnbroking, and his children, Ashley and Seth, were his chosen successors, trained to manage one of the busiest pawn shops in the country. Yet most people tuned in for the family drama they were sure to enjoy. To be fair, every on-screen fight had its root in something real. Ashley did demand authority, Seth did push for a technological advancement, and Les did refuse to offer either of them what they wanted. But those disagreements were the kinds of outbursts any family business would recognize. However, the producers stretched those moments and edited them to make them look like feuds. The Golds understood the audience wanted drama, so they leaned into the tension. Off-camera, their working relationship was far more disciplined than it appeared. The store handled millions in loans every year, and that kind of operation required unity, not chaos. Former employees described a transparent chain of command that helped everyone know what they had to do. While Les ran the floor, Seth managed business operations, and Ashley oversaw the jewelry division. When factual disputes did happen, they ended behind closed doors, not under bright lights. And every morning, the Gold showed up to work as a single unit. Eventually, that dual existence of being a family and playing one began to blur. On set, Les could be the hardliner, But off-set, he was the father making sure everyone got home safely. Ashley had to watch strangers call her arrogant online, even as she knew that her on-screen assertiveness was what gave the show its edge. Seth had to navigate a version of himself that was more ruthless than the real one. The roles they played were a psychological balancing act few could endure, and many viewers knew nothing about. The irony is that the same arguments that made them famous also kept them close. They knew the show depended on their chemistry, and that the shop depended on their cooperation. The Golds couldn't afford to truly fall apart, not when both their business and their legacy were on the line. So they held on tight. But while the Golds were building a business, the world was busy building characters out of them. When people are allowed to rewrite a family's identity, what could go wrong? The character assassination. When Hardcore Pawn hit its peak, it sold the Gold family as Detroit's most explosive clan, always one argument away from collapse. But the more chaotic the show became, the deeper the truth hid from the audience. The people behind the counter weren't really outlaws or egomaniacs. They were professionals caught inside a scriptless performance. Take Les Gold, for example. On TV, he was the ruthless boss who'd slam his hands on the counter and throw customers out for disrespect. One viral episode showed him refusing a deal on a fake Rolex, then publicly mocking the seller.
Les falls in love with a luxury watch.
This watch could be the buy of a lifetime.
It's 100% real.
But will an expert opinion
So I looked up the numbers.
What'd you find?
turn his dollars into dust?
It didn't come up real.
But that scene, like many others, was edited to appear aggressive. But in real life, Les was known for doing the opposite. He would rather explain to customers how to tell a genuine watch from a fake, even when it cost him a sale. Locals in Detroit remember him as the guy who'd quietly extend a loan deadline if someone came back with a believable story. During the 2008 financial crisis, he reportedly waived fees for customers who'd lost their jobs, a detail reality TV never bothered to film. Meanwhile, Seth Gold became the numbers guy obsessed with money, continually challenging his father's decisions. In one season, viewers saw him accused of undervaluing items to make quick profits. What audiences didn't see was that Seth was behind the store's modernization. He introduced electronic record-keeping, built customer tracking systems, and was one of the first in the industry to advocate for online renewals. The so-called greedy schemer was, in reality, the innovator keeping the pawn business alive in a digital world. As for Les's daughter, Ashley Broad, she was stereotyped as the temperamental daughter who was always storming out or arguing. The producers leaned into her outbursts, cutting scenes to make her seem constantly on edge. But that drama masked her actual authority. Ashley holds a degree in business administration and a certification from the Gemological Institute of America. She oversaw high-value appraisals, trained new staff, and became a voice for women in a male-dominated trade. Even Rich Pyle, the shop's head of security, was cast as an archetype, the streetwise enforcer. He was the guy producers called when an argument needed muscle. But in truth, Rich had been a longtime family friend and a musician who'd toured before joining the shop. But not everyone's personality was actually exaggerated. Bobby Janek is a fan favorite, remembered for his loyalty and humor. On the show, he was the calm inside the storm and a relief for viewers who needed a break from the other characters. Through all these contrasts, one truth cuts through. Hardcore Pawn didn't just document a business, it re-engineered its people for television. Every episode needed a climax, and if it didn't exist, editing would create one. But what happens when the spotlight fades? Can American Jewellery and Loan return to what they were before? Or will the characters be too damaged to remember what life used to be? Life after the cameras stopped rolling. When Hardcore Pawn ended in 2015, it didn't end with a dramatic farewell or public fallout. It simply disappeared. 9 seasons deep, millions of viewers could hardly recover from the show's end. And even if other shows sprang up soon after, Hardcore Pawn had left a lasting impression on them. But for most reality shows, that would have been the end. For something they had dedicated their lives to end that way, it would be tough to recover. And that was what the fans thought. However, for the Gold family, the show seemed like a stepping stone, and when it ended, it became the start of something quieter and much more revealing. Without the cameras, American Jewellery and Loan kept running just as it always had. The shop didn't shrink, it grew. The Golds expanded to new locations across Michigan, opened satellite stores, and built an online presence that kept business steady even as Detroit's economy changed. While the show gave them global fame, the store was what gave them staying power. Les Gold returned to what he had always been, a businessman first. With decades of experience, he turned his focus to mentoring young entrepreneurs and talking about financial literacy. He launched speaking tours, podcasts, and interviews about the lessons he'd learned from years in the pawn business. The man once portrayed as an abrasive negotiator was now teaching empathy, trust, and consistency as the foundations of real business success. Seth Gold found a new purpose in modernization. He continued his push to bring technology into the pawn industry, refining digital tools that enabled customers to make payments and check loan status online. These innovations made pawning faster, safer, and more transparent. He also became an advocate for the business model itself, explaining how pawnbroking remains one of the few credit systems that doesn't rely on credit scores or bank approval. His post-show image wasn't about drama anymore. It was about redefining what pawnbroking could be in the 21st century. As for Ashley, she fully stepped out of the shadow of both her father and brother. She turned her television recognition into a brand, founding her own jewelry line and carving out a niche as an independent entrepreneur. She appeared on other media platforms and leaned into the empowerment message that the show never allowed her to express. The pawnshop daughter became the CEO of her own story, a transformation that no script could have written better. Even the show's side characters found their own paths. Rich Pyle moved into media and podcasting, appearing on National Geographic and Discovery Channel programs. Bobby Janiak built a name in voice acting and content creation. They, too, carried the show's recognition into something lasting, proving that the people behind Hardcore Pawn were more than television props. Looking back, the show may have exaggerated their tempers and trimmed their triumphs, but what followed their stories proved that the cameras could never fake their resilience. But there's one last layer of truth hidden beneath Hardcore Pawn's story, something that never made it to the screen. And when what happens behind that counter is revealed, one starts to wonder, was any of it ever real? The lawful pawn. Given how shady deals were portrayed on Hardcore Pawn, many viewers were led to believe that was the actual order of the establishment. However, in real life, American Jewellery and Loan was one of the most heavily regulated businesses in retail. In Michigan, a pawnbroker must hold a license to operate. Michigan compiled laws states that any person, corporation, or firm must first obtain the appropriate license before acting as a pawnbroker. That meant every loan and transaction in a shop like American Jewellery and Loan must comply with the rules. Records matter. Under Michigan law, a pawnbroker must keep a record at the time of receiving any article of personal property for pawn. The record must include a description of the article, the amount loaned, the seller's ID details, and the date and time the goods were received. That means paperwork, numbering systems, and oversight backed the drama-filled moments shown on television. The Gold family couldn't simply haggle unpredictably. They had to comply with the law. Most fans also didn't know that in pawnbroking, interest and fees are capped. According to the law, a licensed pawnbroker may charge no more than 3% per month interest on any loan, and may charge up to $3 per month for storage of pledged property. That sets a legal ceiling for the revenue side of the business, far from the image of unchecked profit the show sometimes implied. Crime prevention and compliance go deeper. Michigan law prohibits a pawnbroker from accepting items from anyone under 18 or from someone they suspect of stealing the item. Additionally, pawn shops like American Jewellery and Loan serve as frontline partners with law enforcement, reporting serial numbers, linking to databases, installing security systems, and maintaining transaction trails. They must retain evidence of item descriptions, photographs, and the identity of the pledgor. When it comes to firearms, the legal maze is even more rigorous. A pawnbroker who accepts a pistol for pawn but then displays or sells it unlawfully violates Michigan Penal Code section. That means for gun transactions, the stakes are higher. Federal laws, background checks, transfer logs, and security protocols apply. Again, the show's depiction of free-for-all dealing concealed the fundamental structure behind each firearm counter. In the end, American Jewellery and Loan's real accomplishment was the shop's ability to operate lawfully and continuously in a city where few businesses lasted. The Gold family's fame came from drama, but their legacy comes from compliance and longevity. So if the cameras painted them as renegades, the laws prove otherwise. Did you know about any of these revelations before now? Which of the Hardcore Pawn cast members is your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.